Sometimes if you really need a job or something, you just say you're an American.
It was very far from my home. I wanted to be as far away from home as possible.
Hey, we need white people or European or someone that's not non-black. Yeah, I've seen non-black.
Do you feel different, you as a black woman here in China? Do you feel different?
Yeah, I do feel different. Everybody from Nigeria is black. It's just what it is. But coming here, everybody was kind of fascinated and you have people staring at you and it's like, oh, I'm really different. Of course, there are people who experience that in other parts of the world as well. But for me, it was a different experience coming here. When they see you, it doesn't matter how light-skinned you are or it's just like you're still, a foreigner, you're still black, You first learn the words of here and you know that, oh, they're talking about a black person and stuff like that. It took a while because you enter buses, you enter some spaces and they'll just be like, everybody will just have this gasp or they just look at you or take photos of you and it just never gets old. Even to this day, there are places I enter and it's like people are like looking. I was really surprised when I first came and I experienced that, but yeah.
And how do you take that? Like, do you feel offended by that? Or do you say like, oh, maybe it's not like they're just curious?
Honestly, I had it both ways. I think genuinely there was a time I was like, I think these guys are just curious. They've never seen a black person who looks like this. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's a lucky day. You see me. So it must be nice for you. But there are other times where it's just like, this is just exhausting. Or you're in an elevator and you can hear them talking about your hair and it's like they're wondering if you wash your hair or if you shower because you're dark skinned and you're just like, oh no.
That's interesting.
You guys, that's not it. But yeah. After a while, I just let it go. I didn't get angry anymore or anything, but it is what it is.
Would you say there's a difference between how they treat you or other foreigners?
For sure. I know there's a difference, and I'm not even going to get into that. I mean, I can get into that too, but there are times where it's like, oh, this student who is from this country, because obviously when an American walks in the room and I walk into the room, they're going to talk to the American first. They're going to ask them all the questions because some of them are really fascinated by this idea. I also tend not to generalize because there's some people who are kind of open-minded who are Chinese as well, and they wouldn't really think of it that deep. But for the most part, you see people being fascinated about this, and they're like, oh, Megoren, or that means American. It's like all fascinated about that. For Nigeria, I mean, they'll just ask, I'll be like, oh, you guys do football and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, this, that. But generally, I think even just being a black person, sometimes it might just hinder their thought process towards you. And that also extends to people from the Caribbeans and even African Americans sometimes until they find out that, oh, they're not from a country in Africa. So that can be hard for people who come from those countries as well. Yeah, I do feel like there's a difference, for sure. There is a difference. And when I first came, there was a wave of people being deported and it was a problem.
From your country?
Yes. And not just from my country, there were other countries as well. And all eyes would just be on you. And, once you find out you're Nigerian and you go to the bureau, there's this bureau I didn't like going to because it was always a problem. When you go there to work on your visa process, I mean, you only need the documents, the school assigned everything, but they still call us to a room for interview because I'm Nigerian, and it's like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything. Someone else could be from a different country and they may be doing something wrong, but you wouldn't know that because it's easy to just separate people based on where they're from. For them, there's no knowledge.
To a room too.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Wow. Honestly, I don't even know where that came from. I don't know what it means. I don't know why they do it, but it is what it is.
Would you say there's a difference between being Black American or being Black African in China?
Honestly, I would say there's a difference. I think this conversation can also extend to people who are actually African American. I'm just African and I'm from Nigeria, but I have talked to maybe people who are maybe Nigerian British or just African American in general, and they will say like they didn't understand this whole thing, but now they kind of understand that, oh, they are kind of different because they have that privilege of maybe having a British passport or an American passport, but they're still Black. And yeah, that's just it. I think there is a difference. There is a difference because they have those privileges as British citizens or American citizens. I do not. And I know it's partly obviously because of the state of our country, but I just think like every human being still deserves respect in some way, shape, or form. But I think they were even surprised at how many Nigerians had come here and how intelligent people were because, we had leading people like Adura, who was like my senior, and was getting all these scholarships, being at the top of the class. And then there was me, and it's like Gerald, Caleb, all these people, and they're like, oh, you guys really go to school and do all these things. And it's like, of course we go to school. Like people go to school, but I don't know. Some people just have this idea or this mentality, and they just stick to it. This stereotype, and they stick to it. We all kind of have stereotypes, but
Yeah, we do.
it's just something we can unlearn. But they've not gotten anywhere to unlearning some of the things. I'm still surprised every day. China is full of surprises.
How did you get in touch with China? Did you apply for scholarships? Did you find a job?
Luckily, my uncle was already here as a PhD student, so he knew everything about China. So me, the only thing I had to do is send the documents. He would tell me this, I'll just send to him. He did all the applications. Then he was like, go for your visa interview. China, boom.
Yeah.
27th November 2018.
Wow.
I'll never forget that day coming to China.
And why did your uncle decide to come to China?
I think because of the opportunities in China.
So it is well known? Like, is it something that people know about in Ghana?
Yeah, very much. There are a lot of Ghanaians who are very aware of like China, like mostly PhD students, you know. Yeah.
What do Chinese people think when you tell them that you're from Ghana? What are like some of the preconceptions they have?
Yeah, first of all, when I came to China, I was always surprised. You tell somebody Ghana, they'll be like, Ghana? What is Ghana? They don't know my country. I'll be like, wow, I've been in my country. I'm always happy. I'm in Ghana. I'm a Ghanaian. But people don't even know about my country. So when you say Ghana, they will say, Canada? Because they know Canada, but not Ghana, you know. So I feel like coming to Suzhou has taught me so much because China is totally different based on the cities.
Yeah.
You might be in Suzhou and you think this is how China is. You go to another city, it's different.
It's so big, right?
So big, different cultures, different mindset of the Chinese people. Everything is totally different.
So there are Black Americans and there are Black Africans. Is there a difference?
They don't mostly even check your passport. Sometimes we Ghanaians who have stayed here, we know. Sometimes if you really need a job or something, you just say you're an American. Meanwhile, you're a Ghanaian, you say you're American. Oh, wow, Megoren. And they believe they don't really go through to confirm whether you are African or this thing. They, okay, that's all. And that is something strange and different to me. Because initially, I thought if I say I'm from Canada, I'm a Canadian, maybe they'll find out, yeah, okay, oh, Canada. But when you say Ghana, it's different.
Yeah, they treat you different.
Yeah. So in order to survive, in order to enjoy here very well, sometimes you study the environment and see what do they really want. Are they people who really want Americans or this thing? Then
I think like most of the racism and discrimination comes out of ignorance sometimes, out of not knowing.
Exactly.
And you can be like this bridge, which is like something you're trying to do with your channel, I guess, also.
Yeah.
Do you speak Chinese now? Because when you arrived, you didn't speak Chinese.
Yeah, now I can speak fluently. Yeah.
And how would you say that your life has changed before you spoke Chinese and now that you do speak Chinese?
Yeah, I feel like if you want to really enjoy China, you have to learn Chinese language.
Right.
Learning Chinese language has really changed my life. Many opportunities. I've gotten so much opportunities in China because of the language I could speak.
Right.
Yeah, you get job opportunities everywhere.
How did you end up in China? Like from Nigeria to China, how did it happen? What brought you here?
Okay, so I did something they call pre-med in a university in Lagos it's the University of Lagos. It's like the biggest university in Lagos. And then they had this exchange program with Suzhou University. So when I was, I think my last 4 months of my pre-med, they told us about this opportunity to come to China to continue medical school. And if we were interested, we should signal and we should reach out to them. So I discussed with my parents and then they said, okay, let's go learn more about this. And that's how the whole thing started. And
is it because you got a scholarship or you just like chose China?
Unfortunately, no scholarship. I did have another option to go to Debrecen. It's in Hungary. And then Suzhou University here in China. But I chose China because China, to me, then was like very fascinating. It's still a fascinating place, but then it was even much more fascinating for me, and it was very far from my home. I wanted to be as far away from home as possible, just so I could explore, And so I decided, hey, I'll come to China.
It sounded very intriguing, I guess.
Yeah, it was much more intriguing.
And then you arrived in China. You chose the university yourself.
Yeah, so it's the partnership from my pre-med school and Suzhou University. So it was kind of already chosen for me.
All right. What were your first impressions when you got to China?
Okay, so before I arrived, my impressions of Suzhou were lakes and gardens, because when you Google Suzhou, that's all you see online, the gardens and the lakes. So when I came here, I knew, okay, there have to be some form of development here. It's not just gonna be lakes and gardens, but I was stunned actually by the infrastructure here, the beauty here. It's actually a very beautiful city.
How has it been for you having an African passport and being black to find opportunities that you look like? Were you looking for a job?
Most of my efforts were made through my laptop on my phone. I didn't go to any job fairs or anything. That's because I realized I had a bigger urge to leave China rather than staying for anything. Further studies, working. I think I got to the point where I just wanted to leave. But the little that I did, I found out that China is not a good place for entry-level careers. So I just graduated, so I don't have a lot of experience. It's not a good place for me.
Yeah.
Most of the foreigners they do employ are experienced, at least minimum 3 to 5 years of experience. Then you have a better chance of getting a job in China.
Do you know any Africans in your situation who have a job here in China, who are working
in
here?
healthcare or in
just overall?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of so I know many of them work in the educational industry, which is like the best industry for foreigners to work in China. But some of them also work in engineering, sales and marketing, data analytics.
Yeah.
But most of the ones that come to mind right now working in like Shanghai, not necessarily in Suzhou. Suzhou, most of the Africans that I know who are working here are in the education industry.
So it is possible. You can get a good job, you can get a high income, you just need the experience and maybe like make the right connections. What about when you arrive to China and then you tell people you're from Nigeria or you're from Africa? What are some of their first impressions or maybe preconceptions that they have?
Usually with the Chinese people, I introduce myself. I say I'm from Nigeria. I was actually surprised, but many people that I've told this, they know quite a bit about Nigeria. They've heard about it, and they would, tell me about some of the relationships. They're like, oh yes, we know about the relationship between China and Nigeria. Some of them have also even been to Nigeria or maybe somewhere around Nigeria, so they know a bit about it. And then some other people, I can't blame them, but they don't know anything about it, so I just kind of introduce Nigeria to them and tell them what.
Yeah, there's like ignorance they just have never heard of. And what about Africa as a whole? Because I think like some Chinese people tend to think of Africans as just Africa.
Yes.
Just as in Mexico, they think it's all South America when we're actually from North America.
North America.
So there's some ignorance.
Yes. There's this idea of Chinese people, when they see me, sometimes they wouldn't tell me directly. Maybe they're talking to their friend or they're walking together with family and they're like, oh, look at the, Phaedra and this guy's like African. And they make that assumption, but then it's like maybe they just assume every black person, like everyone in Africa is a black person, Or, sometimes they might have the preconception that Africa is a very poor country. It's, it's a place where you have people who are starving all the time, huts and, that kind of look. I always try to make it a thing to kind of show them, hey, this is also what you can see in Africa. This is also what you can see in Nigeria. It can be like a very beautiful place, really high, like quite a fast developing continent. Yeah.
And what about black people? Do you think you tend to gravitate more towards black people regardless of where they are from? Or do you think it's more like you would gravitate to your own country people?
I think there's something in Africa and the culture in Africa where, we just see each other as family. Not necessarily someone from my country, I might see a black person, and even if I don't approach them and make friends with them, at least I would like make eye contact, like acknowledge the person, like, hey, just hi. And then most I have no problem, hanging out with black people or making friends. with most of my friends, I would say, are, either from Africa or like black people from all over the world.
What is it like being black in China?
I would say it has its ups and its downs. There's sometimes it's nice because I would say like I feel very happy being a black person, and no matter, what the society thinks or anything, I just feel very comfortable being a black person, expressing myself as, black person. However, like sometimes in China, you would notice some situations where you might be, kind of judged, or you would be stereotyped basically based on you being a black person. I remember, there was one time I was at the bank. I remember trying to open a bank account. I walked into this bank and they were like, "Oh, where are you from? Which was your passport?" Gave them my passport. Said, "Oh, you're from Nigeria." They took like about 10 minutes trying to figure everything out. And they later came out saying like, "Oh, sorry, we cannot open your bank account." And I was like, "Why?" They said, "Oh, yeah, because you're from this country, they have some issues." So I'm not sure if it's, me like being black or maybe the country that I'm from, but that was one issue. And then, sometimes there's just a little bit, it's not like, I wouldn't say it's outright racism, but they really don't know anything about black people. They've been told maybe by the media or something, black people are either scammers or, dirty, or they're just out here to take from you or something.
Right.
So some people have that predisposition and they would assume you're like that,
Right.
So, but I don't let that get to me. I just, keep living my life, spreading positivity. And that's how
that's a great attitude, that's the way.
I would say there's racism almost everywhere you go in the world to a certain extent, but in the US you cannot be like so outright with it. Here in China there's a bit of that feeling of it being so direct, like you would be so shocked. Sometimes I see on the WeChat they might make some posts of maybe job offers or job applications, like, "Hey, we need white people or European or someone that's non-black." I've seen non-black.
I've seen that
in some situations. I'm like, "Oh wow, you cannot do that anywhere else in the world. Like you would never see that in the US. You would never see that, of course not in Nigeria." But,
in that case, I think it's because it's such a recently opened country.
Yes.
I think like 30 years ago, foreigners weren't even allowed here.
Yes.
I don't know the exact time, but it's true. It's like Europeans or Americans. Like that also excludes sometimes many times Latins, especially for teaching jobs.
I see.
So I know what you mean.